What's up, motherfuckers? Welcome to the Covid Commentary SLC. I want to thank you guys for joining us. And I also want to let you know that tonight's probably going to be a little bit of a different podcast from us. I obviously won't open up with the F-bomb. I'll usually wait till later on, till people start tuning out. But this one we're going to be calling the Rant Cast because I've just been getting into so many, I guess, arguments with people. I've been seeing so much misinformation out there, and I've had all this tension just building up, and I kind of wanted to just get on this podcast and just release it all. So if you don't want to be listening to me and CJ bitch for the next hour and a half, then it might be best for you to tune out now. And I also just want to say with this podcast, I'm going to go ahead and recommend a 2-drink minimum. And, I totally copied that from this podcast I listened to, the QTR podcast. And this other guy I listened to, George Gammon, he would say it's stiff drink time. And you know what? It is stiff drink time. So let's get started. So, CJ, have you been seeing as many oblivious people as I have? Have you been getting into any Facebook arguments like me?
Yeah, a few Facebook arguments, more so in the general public. I get the weird looks and stuff wearing masks still. But my first wearing masks out in public, I got out of the car and this lady drove by right away and was like, "Where'd you get that mask?" So I mean, there's people that are kind of caring and staying on top of it, but I mean, for the most part, even I'm surprised in grocery stores that they're not more people wearing gloves. Even I went to get a prescription, and there was a guy that was right next to me, and he was just coughing and sneezing away and not covering his mouth, not doing anything. Like, it's gotten ridiculous. And just like the bus driver, I think I told you about that, the guy that had a lady get on coughing, and he actually went onto Facebook and did a little rant and kind of yelled about the lady that was in her 60s, and then 4 days later came down with coronavirus, and just on Wednesday he ended up passing away. So like, it's real serious. Even if you're not a carrier, or if you don't know you're not a carrier, then you could possibly be a carrier, and you're putting other people's lives at risk. If everybody could just step up and cover their damn mouths with whatever they have, a mask is preferable, and like we were just talking about beforehand, I mean, anything is better than nothing, a bandana, something, but I mean, preferred an actual medical mask or N95s.
So that bus driver, he actually died from getting the coronavirus after letting that lady on his bus?
Yeah. There's not a proof that he got it from her, but I mean, one can only assume that it was something between her and the other people's malpractice of not covering their mouths and not just being, sanitary in a time like this.
Yeah, and that reminds me of what we brought up in one of our other shows, that like you're never really gonna know if you killed someone. This is like the ultimate test of your responsibility. And I mean, I have been getting in a couple Facebook arguments here and there, and one thing I told someone was that this opinion that you're sharing, that this is no big deal, you're spreading it around like it's nothing, is potentially putting someone into risk, putting someone into harm's way. So it's the misinformation right now is usually fairly harmless, but in today's day and age with this virus going around, misinformation could be the difference between life and death between somebody.
Oh, correct. Sorry, I'm just reading up on the World Health Organization's what they recommend exactly when to use a mask.
Yeah, that's definitely something we want to go over a little bit in the masks as part of our rant. But before we get too much into that, let's just go ahead and touch on the cases, just give everyone a quick update. We passed 1 million a couple days ago, and now we are at 1.2 million, still showing no signs of slowing down. U.S. is still dominating the football game, basically coming in at the highest score every day now. I mean, I think I heard we're the numbers we're getting is the next 6 nations combined. I mean, but of course China's bullshit, so we got to just disqualify them. They're totally disqualified from the game. Their score doesn't even count anymore. But yeah, seeing and what's something that's really unsettling, and I don't understand exactly what's going on here. I totally thought this number would be going down and down and down, because when we first started talking about this, the closed cases death rate, I believe it was like 15% the first time me and CJ brought it up on the show. And when I brought it up, I was saying, yeah, and I was saying this is really high. We don't expect it to be this high. I'm waiting any day we're going to start seeing this go down, and then it creeps up to 16, 17, 18. Every time it goes up, either I send CJ a message or he sends me a message, because it's just so hard to believe. And right now we're at 21% of all closed cases have ended in death. So, I mean, the number we're hearing tossed around is 1%, 2% death rate. And I mean, if you take the total amount of cases, 1.2 million, by the total amount of deaths, 64,000, I believe that would come to like a 0.5%. Just doing it in my head, I could be totally wrong with that, but you can't really determine too much just from dividing those two numbers, because most of these cases still haven't reached a conclusion. So this closed cases number is going to be a much better reading, although I have to say there's no way, unless everybody's just totally off, there's no way this closed case death rate is going to end anywhere above 15%. So that should go down at some point, but I mean, people just aren't recovering from this very fast. So we have 311,000 closed cases. So that's people that have either recovered or died. There's only two ways you can end this. And out of those 300,000, there's 800,000 that are still active. So the vast majority of people who have this, or there's 890,000, 5% of which are in serious or critical condition. The vast majority of this still have it. So we're gonna see how this actually all plays out.
I was going to point out the fact that one of the few countries that don't show how many tests they've done is China.
Yeah, that's something me and CJ have been talking about a little bit. Is they just barely added to the Worldometer's website the total number of tests that a country's done. So that gives you a much better idea of the reading you're getting. And it looks like in USA, we've done the highest amount of tests. So Trump's accurate when he says we've done the highest amount of tests, but per 1 million population, so the tests we've done for every person we have, we're actually not doing that great. We're not at the bottom, which we were when we were first starting this. If it would have showed the tests per 1 million population, the US would have been way down at the bottom, but now we're kind of up in the mid level. So for every 1 million of population, we've done about 5,000 tests in the US. And, just as a comparison, in Spain, they've done 7,500 per 1 million. Italy's done 10,000. Germany's done 10,000. France is a little bit lower than us. And like we said, China isn't reporting, which just adds to the mystery and the mistrust even more, because obviously we brought up so many times that we don't trust their numbers, and so many sources I listen to do not trust their numbers, and they're just not reporting how many tests they do. So that's confusing. That's questionable.
Yeah, they're like every day it's like, oh, we have 30 new cases, we have 80 new cases, and it's like yesterday there were 19 new cases, but no total tests. Like, no idea how many people they've tested, or let alone how many numbers they're actually releasing.
Yeah, I think it's pretty safe to say that all of their numbers are off by 5 to 10 times minimum. Their death rate is off by 10 times minimum. Total cases off by 10 times. I mean, we might as well just eliminate them from the whole thing, which is unfortunate, because if China was releasing good info, I mean, it's really fucked up if you think about it. Information is saving lives in this battle here, and China's just bullshitting everyone, and has been from the beginning. And I always want to remind people, I don't have anything against China. I have things against the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, who has been in charge of this, and who has been hiding this, and who is basically responsible for this whole fucking thing. I mean, nobody really knows how this virus started, from what I've heard, that's still kind of up in the air. I've heard it came from a bat. I've heard it came from a lab, and we may never know because of all the misinformation out there. But yeah, China has just been bullshitting us from the beginning. And I actually heard something said it kind of was the U.S. administration blaming China for how bad it's gotten because of all the bad data they've released. And it is true, they do get some blame for that. But also, any country that took China for their word is a fucking idiot. I mean, China is known for lying. I saw this lie coming a month or more ago. I was hearing stuff. So, I mean, there's no way I have more access to information than Trump and his team and all the other people in charge. Everybody should have seen this coming from a mile away. And now it's just confirmed itself 10 times over.
I love Chinese food, and I love the Chinese people, but I do not like the Chinese government.
Okay, it sounds like we just lost a little bit of connection there, but we are back. So let's just jump right into the death counts here, which is, the scariest thing here. I mean, if we see cases shooting up, it's one thing, but it's the deaths really that makes this problem. Well, the deaths and the serious or critical count, which, we really don't have that many ICU beds. I mean, if 100,000 Americans is such a tiny portion of our population, but if we needed 100,000 people on ICU beds, that would stress our system to the max. So I've been keeping a really close eye on the serious or critical count here in the U.S. Oh, excuse me. And we were kind of at 3,000, 4,000 for a while. And then lately it's jumped in the past couple of days, jumped up to 8,200. And obviously, that's not all people going to be in the exact right state or the exact right county to receive that ICU bed. So I know a lot of that's focused in New York right now. And I already heard Cuomo saying they're having to decide who gets a ventilator and who doesn't. So, I mean, in New York, we're already to that breaking point. And so hopefully we don't see that accelerating even more. We've had 2 days in a row now where we've had 1,300 deaths in the U.S. And France has been getting hit really hard with the deaths. They've been kind of lagging behind, but then the past 2 days, they had 1,300 yesterday and 1,000 today. And considering how small they are compared to us, and they're getting as many deaths as us, that's probably a really catastrophic thing going on in France. UK was one of those countries that was saying, oh, let's just let this spread through. Let's just let everyone build a herd immunity, which I could bitch at anybody who basically says that, because they don't understand that the herd immunity idea is like a last fucking resort when it comes to this. Okay. You need minimum of 60% of the population to get herd immunity. And if we look up right here, if we look at the world tab, it tells you how many people have had it per 1 million. So if we divide the world up into groups of million people, 154 out of every one of those millions has had it. So that's well under 1%. That's like under 0.1% of the world who has gotten this disease. And we're already seeing catastrophic deaths, 60,000 deaths. And you can always compare it to something else to make it not sound as bad. I'm sure 1 million people die in a car accident, or 1 million people die from taking a dump or whatever, vending machines falling on them, I'm sure. But this is all brand new deaths. All of these deaths shouldn't be happening. So this is all adding on to the deaths that we already have. So 60,000 deaths of people dying from basically choking on whatever the fuck happens in their lungs, mucus or whatever, just slowly dying. I mean, this is a total catastrophe. Just lost my train of thought. You want to pick up there?
Well, no, for real. I mean, it's sad the amount of people that just haven't taken it seriously, but let alone the countries that waited too long to take it seriously. I mean, we had been going back and forth for months, I want to say, when we had, only like 1,000, not even 1,000 cases in the United States, I feel like. We literally have been just going back and forth watching it, and just the way that the numbers jump on the deaths daily, it's not one of those things that are slowing down along with the serious or critical. It's just one of those things that keep going up, and which is sad because then you figure the serious or critical are the people that are still living, and like the deaths would be the deaths. So you got to figure if the serious and criticals keeps going up, that we're losing people, but that number like goes folds over basically.
Yeah, yeah. I remember what I was talking about, the herd immunity thing. We really, if we get up to herd immunity, then we're gonna have millions and millions of deaths. So I've heard multiple people say, "Why are we freaking out about this so much? Just let it get to herd immunity, and then we'll be immune to it." And you know what? That may be the best route. If we all, considering all things, that may be what we need to do. But first of all, we have to slow the curve. That just has to happen, because we cannot have 10,000 people rush to the hospital in critical condition in one day. It may sound like a better idea to just let everyone get to herd immunity faster, but the system cannot handle that. Okay. And then if the hospitals become overwhelmed, you start having people die from other shit. You start having people that can't get an ambulance come to them. You have people that can't have their babies being born, and then that's just going to add to the death toll anyway. And it's going to make the death toll worse because the people with coronavirus can't get treated. So we may need to reach herd immunity at some point. Hopefully we don't have to get to that. Hopefully this can go away some other way where we don't need herd immunity, because the whole herd immunity idea is guaranteeing there's going to be minimum 5 million deaths. Minimum. That's on the more optimistic side. I mean, there could be 100 million deaths from this.
Oh yeah. I mean, you got to think the one way that would stop everything in its tracks, or would be if the entire world was to say, okay, together, like, everybody stay home. Like, let's give you 2 weeks worth of food. Let's give you 2 weeks worth of this and that, just enough to get by. You don't have to leave your house. Everybody stay home. And, watch the cases go down. I'm sure hospital rates would go up, but then, I mean, I know it's something that would sound drastic, but then in that sense as well, you're gonna lower the curve that way. Right now, worrying about jobs and worrying about the economy and stuff, it's one of those things like, if you worry about that the whole time while people are dying, there's not going to be an economy in the end of this. It's almost like if all these countries and territories need to kind of pull together and say, okay, we'll halt our stuff, you halt your stuff. Like, let's. I mean, hell, I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but let's close the markets for 2 weeks, no trading at all, and let's let those 2 weeks go down, and then let's see how like people are healing, and see how if our total recovered is going up, if we're having less cases, then that's when we could start thinking about reopening the states. The problem is that people are in such a rush right now. I mean, it's sad to say that Utah is one of the 10 states that aren't on lockdown, and it's because there's these big, Republican governors that want to keep their states open and, show Trump like, oh, look, we could stay open and we could still, produce everything we need to produce and get back to the federal government. And I think it's just becoming like this crazy shit show. Honestly, it's just a total shit show. I mean, there's no other way to put it.
Yeah, it's such a complex problem. And I guess the thing that irritates me the most with people is when they just say, like, well, why don't we just do this? If you just did this, that would solve it. And it's just not that easy. We are between a rock and a hard place, and another hard place, and another hard place, and another rock. That's where we're at right now. This bottom of a fucking shit storm of heavy objects all crushing us. And there's just no decision that we can make that's going to make this better. Like how you said, if we just closed everything down for 2 weeks, that still wouldn't quite stop it. And so it would still be spreading, and it would still kind of stay alive. There'd be that ember of coronavirus still lingering around, waiting to start the next fire. But we also can't just open everything up and let everyone get herd immunity. Those are the two kind of like black and white options of we just need to do this or that. But it's the best answer is going to be somewhere in the middle of that, where we're weighing the loss of the economy, we're weighing the loss of life, and we're weighing all the different things and of how we're going to handle this with as little life's loss as possible. And like I said, if the economy crashes hard enough, people are going to die from that. And yeah, we just need to understand that this is not just a simple problem, and we need to understand that there's millions of smart people doing their absolute best to try and fix this problem. A lot of things I hear people say is that, this is basically the government trying to come in and force all this stuff on us, and they're trying to force population control. And you know what? Maybe there is some kind of conspiracy behind it of where this was invented in a lab or something. But you got to understand, 99% of people out there are just like you and me, just like us. They want to do what's right. They want to fix this. They want to be the guy that made this better. They want to be the doctor that saved the patients with the new treatment they're coming out with. Nobody's holding back on this shit. No one's letting this run rampant. Okay, maybe there's one guy who was, from China that came in here purposely to spread it, or some bullshit like that. Maybe something like that's happening. But everything on the medical side and on the logistics side, most people are doing their absolute best to make this problem go away.
No, if that's the thing. If people can't expect that it's just gonna go back to normal either. Like after all this is hit, like you're gonna see a lot more hand sanitizer in places, and even after everything settles down and whatnot, there's still gonna be places that make you wear gloves. You're still gonna go to the grocery store. People are gonna still be wearing masks. Like it's not something that's gonna entirely go away. I mean, the goal is to learn a way to treat it, but then as well as learning a way to treat it, you want to have that way of fighting it as well. You can't just expect to build up antibodies and that next winter when this thing comes around you're just going to be fine, because if you don't get it and you don't go through the whole 2 weeks of having it, and or over 2 weeks of having it, if you don't do that, then you're not you're in no place of just like reopening everything. And that's the thing, is a majority of people haven't gotten it. So if you're going to open up your country and try to do things normally, or even just do things normally in half the country, you're just putting all those people at risk.
Oh yeah, and I was looking up the Spanish flu a little bit, because this kind of resembles that, and that's one of the deadliest outbreaks that we've ever had. And that was a 2-year long process for the Spanish flu to come out, to work its way through, and to do all the damage that it did. Millions of people died, and they implemented social distancing back then, and they thought they had a hold on it, and then they started reopening shit again, and then the second wave came in, and it was even worse than the first wave. The second wave is what really killed the most amount of people. So people think this is just gonna be, and it's not their fault necessarily. It's a really hard thing to comprehend unless you're nerds like us and have been researching it like crazy. If you're just the average guy, then you see one little piece of information and it's going to make you feel like this is no big deal. Like I actually have one right here. It has all the deaths from everything that's happened between January 1st to March 25th. So this was like this list ended like 8 or 9 days ago, and it has seasonal flu between January 1st and March 25th. 113,000 deaths. Malaria, 200,000 deaths. Suicide, 250,000 deaths. Traffic fatalities, 313,000 deaths. And coronavirus, 21,000 deaths. So if you just see that and you haven't been researching this, you're like, oh, okay. Whew, we can all relax. Between January 1st and March 25th, which is like 2 or 3 months, whatever, only 21,000 deaths. That's nothing compared to everything that's happened out there. And this is the mistake I see most people making, is that they don't know that this is growing at an exponential rate. So in the past 8 or 9 days, this 21,000 deaths has tripled, and we're past 60,000. What are we at right now? We are at 64,000. So in the first 3 months of this happening, we just did all of that in 8 or 9 days. So that really, if that trend continues, then we are going to be seeing tens of thousands of deaths in a day and millions of deaths total. So yeah, that just goes to show that, you know, this whole thing is just really hard for people to understand. And yeah, I don't think things are really going to just go back to normal, especially not when it comes to the economy. When we were in possibly the biggest bubble in US history, and that shit has popped. There's no bringing that shit back. It's popped.
Yeah, our economy is going to take a while to get back to anywhere near where it was, if it ever does. I mean, this whole thing could result in the entire global economy just shrinking, which actually, may not be too bad of a thing.
That's true. Degrowth. That's a word that I hear in a lot of the climate change community, and it's interesting because I hear a lot of the climate change stuff, and I hear a lot of the financial world stuff, and both of those worlds are totally separate from each other. Like, people who are interested in climate change do not look into the financial side of things, and the people who are into the financial world do not look into climate change. So it's kind of interesting that I'm kind of looking into both of them. And, you know, there's a catastrophe waiting on both of those fronts. But I have an article here that kind of pertains to what we're talking about here. One of those things that kind of represents how this is not just going to go back to normal. You know, even if it were to disappear tomorrow, you know, there would still be a lot of issues we'd have to resolve with the economy. But so last week we had a record-breaking amount of unemployment filed, unemployment claims, and that was at 3.2 million. And the previous record was like a couple 100,000. And I looked at a chart. It shows all of the weekly unemployment claims that have been filed, and this chart went all the way back to the 60s. I actually posted this on Facebook, and it goes along as pretty much a flat line from the 60s until 2020. And there's like these tiny little microscopic bumps that keep happening, and those bumps represent a recession. And then it goes all the way to 2020, and it just goes straight up. The graph doesn't, there's no curve in it or anything. It just skyrockets straight up. That's 20, 30 times higher than any of the previous bumps. And so the amount of that 3.2 million, we just barely beat that record again at 6.6 million new claims this week. So a total of 10 million people have filed for unemployment in the US in the past 2 weeks. So this is completely unheard of. This has nothing like this has ever happened in the history of the United States, as far back as we can go. There's never been 10 million people all filing for unemployment at once. And, you know, and it's unfortunate because if you're listening to the mainstream media and stuff right now, they're saying like, oh, Amazon hires 100,000 people. Oh, this other job, now they need more people because of the way business is shifting. And you talk to people and they're like, oh yeah, I know jobs have been lost, but have you seen all the new jobs opening up? You know, all those people just need to go right over there and Uber and DoorDash and working from home and all these things. You know, they're kind of trying to stay on the optimistic side, but if we just balance this out evenly, there's maybe like 3% optimism versus 90% pessimism. You know, that's kind of how reality's working. We're seeing a little bit of jobs increase in certain areas, but the vast majority of things in restaurants, movie theaters, all these brick and mortar stores that, you know, a good amount of them probably aren't getting any sales, like sporting goods stores and shit like that. You know, obviously Walmart and Smith's and all the food places are probably going to be booming, but the vast majority of people are just shit out of luck.
Well, and also you got to think too, like home improvement stores and places like that are gonna be booming for a little bit just because we do have spring coming. But in the long term, you know, the jobs that are being made because of this crisis are in no way giving us some sort of cushion from the jobs that we've lost.
Oh yeah, there's no way. And I bet this is just something I'm thinking of off the top of my head. I haven't looked at any real numbers, but I bet a good amount of the high paying jobs have been lost and a good amount of low paying jobs have been created. That's just kind of what I would imagine.
Well, but yeah, places like Kroger and a lot of other stores. I can't think of any examples. I want to say Target did too, but and Walmart are starting to give employees bonuses and whatnot. But with the jobs that are being replaced with the supermarkets and stuff like that, they're in no way giving us some sort of cushion from the jobs that are being lost from the forefront. Those more high-paying jobs are being lost, and yeah, we're seeing some lower-paying jobs be created, but they're not going to they're not going to make any difference in the unemployment rate.
Yeah, and I'm hearing some people say, and I'm sure this is being blasted out in certain alternative media and Republican media and stuff, and they're saying like, "Oh, all these people shouldn't be filing for unemployment. They just need to go find one of the new jobs that's coming out," and kind of talking shit on unemployment. I bet there's a good amount of that going on, but the way I see it, and I know a couple people that have filed for unemployment already, and I don't blame them one bit. Okay, if you want to file unemployment, more power to you. I don't even care if you're cheating the system. Go for it, because you know what? The banks, all the big corporations, all the hedge funds, all those motherfuckers that have been literally screwing us over for years, they're getting fresh printed money. So you know what? If there's going to be all this printed money that's basically making all of our dollars worth less, then you might as well be getting some of it on unemployment. As a matter of fact, I applaud you if you're signing up for employment. I encourage you, go for it, because this system we have now is fucked. Okay, if you really look at it, and this actually leads into my dollar rant that I wrote up. So I'll go ahead and get into that. It's pretty long. Let me pull this up real quick. All right, here we go. So I started off with people say money is the root of all evil, but that's complete bullshit. Okay, fiat currency is the root of all evil. Real money is a beautiful and virtuous thing. Real money can't be created in infinite quantities by politicians who've been bought out by lobbyists. It's so fucked up what's happening in the financial world behind the scenes, and 99% of people have absolutely no fucking clue what's going on. And it's not because they're dumb. It's just such an incredibly boring and overly complicated topic that you'd have to have no life like me to even consider investigating it. It all comes down to inflation. But before I get into the inflation, I want to go ahead and start off with an example to illustrate what's happening, okay? If we look at the past 5 years, stock markets have been going way up, is what you hear. I mean, most people may not hear that if they're not into investing, but anybody who has been following the markets knows that we've been in this massive bull market, okay? The Dow Jones in the past 5 years has gone up from 18K to 29K. So that's basically a 50% increase in 5 years. That sounds like a really good return on your investment, right? Wrong. Because here's the thing. When you measure it against gold, see, gold doesn't ever go up or down in value, in real value. It stays basically the same. The price of gold just measures how much value the dollar has lost. So if the price of gold goes up, that's not because gold is getting more expensive. It's because the dollar has been getting weaker and weaker and weaker. So 5 years ago, gold was 1,100 an ounce. Now it's 1,650. That's a 50% increase. So those 5 years where the stock market has supposedly been skyrocketing has been total bullshit. Of course, the nominal value of stocks has been going up if the value of the dollar has been dropping. So the stocks going from 18K to 29K doesn't mean shit if your dollar has lost all this value. But the interesting thing is, now that the stock market's crashed and the Dow's gone back to 21,000, gold is still sitting at 1,600. So the Dow has lost most of its gains over the past 5 years, and the gold is still sitting in the positive. You would have been better off just buying gold and just sitting on it with basically no risk for those 5 years than doing all these trades in the stock market and taking all this risk. So how does this inflation actually happen? Here's what's going on. Every year, the government runs a massive deficit. That basically just means they're spending more than the taxes they're collecting. So how do they cover the difference? The Treasury issues bonds to the general public to collect the needed funds. These bonds pay interest and are backed by the government, so they're perceived as a very safe investment. If you have millions of dollars saved up and the government can guarantee you a 5% return on those millions, that sounds like a pretty good deal. Lately, though, interest rates have been lowered to 0% on these bonds. So now, even though real rates tend to bounce between 0 and 1, but if you consider inflation, which is, depending on where you look, minimum of 2%, maximum 10% if you look at shadow stats. So who's dumb enough to loan the government money just so you can be paid back with less than you started with, less purchasing power? Well, basically nobody's that dumb anymore. So all of these bondholders have been ditching this toxic garbage because the interest rate is so low on them, but they can't just get rid of it. There needs to be a buyer on the other end. So over the past decade, the Federal Reserve has been stepping in to buy this government debt. So hold on a sec. The government has been issuing bonds so it can get money for its debt, and then it's been buying back those bonds because no one wants to hold them. Well, technically, the Federal Reserve is separate from the government, but basically, yeah, that's what's been happening. So where is this money coming from if the general public's not buying it and getting interest back on it? The Federal Reserve literally just types this new money into existence to buy this government debt. So now there doesn't need to be a real physical human being to buy these government bonds. So the government has nothing to stop it from going into infinite debt. And this has been a slow process that's been happening. We've been doing it little by little the past decade, and now the floodgates have just opened to where now the Fed is the main buyer of this government debt. The government signs a spending bill of whatever they want, trillions and trillions if they want, and then they issue the bonds, and then they print money to buy those bonds. Okay, I might be simplifying this a little bit. I know it's probably a little more complex than this, but that's essentially what's going on. Okay, this is an inherently inflationary trend, and it perpetuates itself. It needs to keep going. Even though they brought the interest rate down to 0% on this debt that they're taking out, they still have to make monthly payments on it, even though there's no interest. So where do they get the money to pay back the loan? There sure as hell isn't enough taxes. They just print more money to pay back the debt that they're already in. Keep in mind, this bond buying is just one single avenue that they have for money creation. Every time a new dollar is created or loaned into existence, the value of every other dollar decreases. And the funniest part is, this devaluation is exactly what every major country is trying to do. Okay, the US government is trying their hardest to devalue the dollar. But think about it. If they devalue their currency, then the debt they owe becomes easier to pay back. Okay, if you owe somebody $1,000 and the dollar loses half of its value because there's twice as much of it out there, your loan doesn't double. You don't now owe them $2,000. You still owe them the same 1,000, and it becomes much easier to pay it back. All the wealthiest individuals have positioned themselves in the stream of this newly created money. The dollar is how we measure value. It's what we work so hard for. It's our means of survival. But it's also the tool the government uses to transfer wealth from the bottom to the top. If all the people at the top are first in line to get the newly created money, then what's effectively happening is it funnels wealth straight from the lower and middle class directly to the top percent. The people at the top don't care if their dollar loses 5% of their value in a year if they just received 50% more dollars. Think about it. Look at this scenario. Let's say you're in a community of 1,000 people and everyone has $100. So there's $100,000 in total. If you were to print another 100 just for yourself, you would be twice as rich as you were before, and the currency would have only lost 0.1% of its value. That loss is shared evenly and basically extracted from all of the other $100,000 out there, even though now there's $100,100 out there. You basically became twice as rich, and everybody else only lost 0.1%. As long as these people at the top are receiving more funny money every year than the rate of inflation, it basically acts as a stealth tax that sucks Americans dry by making their dollars worth less every year. This rate of inflation has been pretty high the past couple years, but it's about to explode to a level we have never seen before, at least in my lifetime. I don't know about before that, but we are currently around 24 trillion in bond debt. This is where we sit right now. That's where we've been building up over the past decades. Last year, we ran $1 trillion deficit, so we would have came in around 25, if we can continue that trend. But this year, because of the coronavirus, we're going to run a minimum $8 trillion deficit. Okay, there was 1.5 trillion created a few weeks ago for the repo market. That was the first big bailout that we heard of. I don't know if you remember that. It was like a couple weeks ago, maybe even a month ago. And then just recently, there's another 2 trillion in bailouts. That's the one everyone's been talking about lately that is going to companies, and that's where our $1,200 check's going to be coming from. And now Trump's talking about a $2 trillion in printed money to go towards infrastructure, and it sounds like that's going to pass. And also, there was $700 billion they threw in quantitative easing, that's the bond buying that I'm talking about, where the Fed prints money to buy the government debt. So there was $700 billion to start there, and they've been doing $125 billion per day. And this doesn't even include the trillions that have been lost in tax revenue because no one's spending any money right now. So we're going to effectively add on 25% or 30% of our debt just in 1 year. Okay. This makes me so angry because every single person in the US chases the dollar and is entirely hypnotized by the dollar. There is exactly zero chance of convincing anyone to stop using the dollar. I mean, I know I'm going to still use it, even though it's the very tool that keeps all the most irresponsible people in power through the system I just described. Luckily, though, I don't need to convince anyone of anything. This system simply cannot go on forever. I can say one thing with absolute certainty. The dollar and every other bullshit fiat currency in the world will collapse. The only question is when. There's too many people dipping their hands into the money printing cooking jar. Too few people that run genuinely beneficial and responsible corporations. It's going to be a long, painful process and will change the very world as we know it. But this needs to happen. Okay, I'm not excited for it. Part of me isn't, but another part of me is, just because I know how bullshit this system is that we currently have. Okay, the world cannot function when a few people control the most important resource on the planet, or the most perceived important resource on the planet, because it's obviously not even a resource. It doesn't even have any value, but it's perceived to have so much value. Okay, the world can't function when a few people have full control of that resource and can make as much of it as they want. The government has no need for your vote. They have no need for your tax money even anymore. Okay, this can only end one way. Every fiat currency reverts to its real intrinsic value, which is zero. Whatever monetary system emerges from the ashes of this broken system will define the next era of human life.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, even as you were saying this, I even started pulling up numbers on the U.S. national debt. Just pulled up the national clock and watched it just tick away. It's quite ridiculous how much the U.S. dollar is losing its value and how much more debt the United States continues to grow in.
Yeah, and it's funny watching. I mean, I've heard of that website you're talking about. I haven't actually been to it, but I've heard a couple people reference it. But yeah, with the U.S. dollar, if you look at the DXY, the dollar index, it looks like it stays strong. Yeah, last I checked, it was still sitting at around 100, but it's falling at the same rate that every other currency is, because every other country is printing as much, if not more, than we are right now. So if they're all falling at the same rate, then when you compare them all, it looks like none of them's falling. You know, you can only compare your currency in relation to all the other currencies. But even though the DXY is staying strong, we're still going to see massive inflation when it comes to household goods, your bread and your milk, and it's just, we're in the perfect shitstorm. This is going to be the real test of all the currencies in the world, because if there's even a hint of supply chain disruptions from this coronavirus, then you have all the reason why we haven't seen so much inflation is because most of the newly printed money is being hoarded by the individuals at the top, and they're using it for financial investments and all this shit. But if there's a slight disruption in the supply chain, all of that money is going to flood towards all of these much needed resources, and you could see prices in the basic things you need to survive just skyrocket as all this money comes out of hiding.
Oh yeah, and I mean it's kind of weird how when you look at it too, that it'll be one of those things where the at this point the price of gas is going to go down, but the price of everything else is going to go up.
Yeah, the whole gas thing, that is just absolutely insane what's going on there, because I mean, the world is slowly running out of gas. We still have quite a bit, but technically we're getting closer and closer to running out of it. But because of how childish all these country leaders are, they're driving the price down to, I've heard some people in Canada, I believe, they've actually had to pay people to take the gas because it's so hard to store, and these extractors, whatever they're called, they're you can't just shut them off. So the price of gas is just tanking, and when it tanks, you would think that countries would pull back on their production, because there's way less demand. Of course, you gotta slow your shit down, otherwise the market's just going to be flooded with gas. But because all these countries are all want to whip their dick out and all want to put so much pressure on the other countries, Russia and Saudi, they just ramped shit up. So now the market is completely flooded with gas. And I heard somebody say you can buy a bucket of KFC chicken wings for cheaper than you can buy a barrel. I got that wrong. The KFC wings are more expensive than a barrel of oil. I mean, that is just absolutely insane. This resource that drives our world and we're technically running out of is coming in at so cheap, 50 cents a gallon.
Oh, they're saying. Well, I mean, Trump was saying that he's all water's more expensive than oil right now. Fresh water. I don't know if I completely believe that, but I know that it has gone down very, very significantly to where I'm sure that almost like I would say something like a gallon of salt. It costs more.
Yeah, it's probably not quite as cheap as water, but that's a good kind of metaphor to show what's going on here. And I know the U.S. shale industry is going to be hit the absolute hardest from this. We were not running responsibly anyway. Sure, it was creating jobs, and sure, it was creating a whole bunch of oil, but the shale industry is this very fragile industry, basically, because it had such a hard time turning a profit. what the shale industry is basically all of these conventional oil. I'm missing that word. The extraction, the rigs, whatever that word is. All the conventional oil rigs, they went through and extracted all the oil they could from these areas, and then all of the oil guys were saying basically there's no oil left here. It's not profitable for us to extract anymore. And that went on for a couple years. And then eventually the shale guys came back and was like, no, we could pull out a little bit more oil out of this. And so they kind of made all these advancements in fracking to basically blast all this water down in there and fracture the shale to where you can actually extract a little bit more, but it's just takes so much more energy, and you have to constantly be drilling new wells. It's not like how it was before where you could just get a well and it would sit there for a decade, 20 years, and just constantly be sucking out oil like they have in Saudi Arabia right now. These things, you need a constant supply of rigs just to keep it going. And I was just barely listening to a video before this. The rig count is actually going down now. So we are basically watching the shale industry die. Not that it had any life in it to begin with.
No, I mean, I was just even reading up on that just to see how it compares like now back in the day. But I mean, they basically say that we won't run out of oil. The world will destroy itself before we run out of oil. But that's kind of funny in my way of thinking about it, just because so much is focused around the cost of oil, and there are so many reserves that they release, and they'll stop and then release to control the price and whatnot. But I mean, I really do think that in our future, in our near future, that we're going to start seeing gas prices back down to the dollar, and that's going to end up killing these big oil companies, killing their revenue. Therefore, it's going to have that snowball effect, and we're going to have a bunch of those frackers, a bunch of those oil guys, and are going to be losing their jobs. And I mean, who knows, if it gets down to the point where it's so much cheaper to, get it from, Saudi or Russia or, Iran, any of these other countries that are pumping, then I wouldn't put it past us to, for the companies in the U.S. to start shutting down a lot of these places.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't know the ins and outs of it too much, but it probably would make sense for us to just ditch the whole shale industry. I mean, if prices were even close to this low and we could just buy from other places. But yeah, like you said, there's tons of oil on the planet, but the problem is the cost to extract it, the return on energy investment, or whatever that phrase REOI is getting so low. I believe like back in the day it was like 50 to 1 or something. We would have to spend 1 barrel of oil to get back 50 barrels of oil. And now it's dropped down to 10, it's dropped down to 5 in some areas. So there's definitely so much oil out in the world, but it's just a matter of can we even extract it at a good cost. And the thing is we've become addicted to this cheap oil. When they first started extracting oil, we were just finding these huge reserves that would take so little effort to get tons of oil. And we built our society on those reserves. And those easy to get reserves have all started running low, but yet we have the same society that expects easy to get oil. And it's just not out there in most of the places anymore. But yeah, we're going to see low oil prices for a while. But if we see this coronavirus thing end and demand start to pick up, I could see oil prices going to a new high. I could see them going really high to basically to where they should be, because oil is a extremely precious resource that is really hard to get. And like I said, it's getting harder and harder. And I think its true value after all this, I think it's going to be, normally here in Utah, we see like $3 a gallon. I bet $5 a gallon after this is going to become the new normal.
See, I don't know. I go back and forth because, I mean, if the government's doing what Trumpy says they're doing, then they should be buying up all this oil that's really cheap right now while they can. therefore building our stockpile of oil, and then in return, making it cheaper on us because we're not going to stop drilling, so we're going to continue adding to that, but we're also going to have this Federal Reserve of oil that basically can carry the market for quite some time.
Yeah, I've kind of wondered that, like, how long can you store oil for? Like, how much can we really store? I know the world uses like 100 or 105 million barrels per day. I think the U.S. is a good 15 or 20 million of that. So, I mean, we would have to store. I mean, that's per day. 105 million barrels per day the world uses. So, we would have to store up billions of barrels of oil to get us through a year. So there may be something behind that. I don't know too much about the whole storage process, but that may have something to it. But I also know oil is pretty hard to store. Yeah, that's definitely something we'll keep an eye on. It's going to be interesting to watch what happens to the oil price and also kind of what happens to the whole renewable energy scene. If oil prices did go way up, then renewable energies would be the first to benefit from that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, that's what we should be. We should be exploring that for extracting gold. We should be using, solar powered drills. We should be, exploring these other options. Let alone, I mean, we are a world that's dependent on oil, and we should also just be exploring, in general, other options on how to create that power for anything. I mean, we've come quite some way from the Industrial Revolution, where now we really don't need oil for everything, and I think that's why these countries have big stockpiles, because it's not as needed anymore, and there's not as much of a demand. I mean, I guess it's an argument because it goes back and forth, but the population's gotten bigger. But I mean, I really, I I kind of just see it going the other way. I mean, I feel like in the long run, at the end of this, maybe at the end of it, our prices would go up, but it's going to be significantly longer. I feel like we're going to have a good long spurt where it's only going to be, you know, less. It'll be less than $2 for, I'm almost guessing a year.
Yeah, because the coronavirus thing is going to probably take, I wouldn't be surprised if we're dealing with this shit for basically 2 years. We're going to peak here in the next little bit, and hopefully it kind of dies down a little. Hopefully we don't see a huge backlash, sort of second wave coming through like the Spanish flu. But yeah, we're probably going to be dealing with this for at least a year, and that means that oil demand is going to be down for that amount of time. But I think as soon as oil demand comes back, like once everything gets 100% back to normal, and who knows if that's even going to happen. I've heard several people say that there's going to be a pre-virus world and a post-virus world. And who knows what that post-virus world is going to look like. Oil demand may never really get back to the 105 barrels that it was before. If this is a real full-on catastrophe, it could really change the amount that we consume. But touching on the renewable energy, in all my climate change research, I was actually kind of a little bit let down by all of the green energy. I know, like, solar panels and wind, and they seem to just not really be as renewable as most people think they are. And the way that we mine most of the stuff to make them is by running diesel trucks and diesel excavators, and we never had a source of energy that we can actually just run off of renewable energy to create more renewable energy. We always use fossil fuels to basically create the renewable energy. So it's a little bit depressing on that end, because we technically haven't found something that is for sure 100% renewable that we can go to. And society has never gone from a more dense source of energy to a less dense source of energy. So we made our way through wood and through coal and up to natural gas and fossil fuels. And we've never once, and all of those steps have been from a less dense to a more dense. We've never gone backwards towards a less dense. And that's basically what we would be doing with renewable energy, because if you measure the energy that's in a battery compared to the energy that's stored in a barrel of oil or a gallon of oil, I mean, there's just so much per weight. Like you can have a car drive like 500 miles off a tank of gas rather than like 200 miles off a battery, and the battery weighs way more. But yeah, so that's something that I think a lot of climate change oriented people don't really look too much into the details of green energy, and they're just like, yeah, we need to switch everything over to solar panels, we need to switch everything over to wind. But I think people really need to take a second look at what our options are and look, is that going to use more fossil fuel? Well, definitely not more, but it's going to use fossil fuels still. And we're in a carbon crisis right now. Carbon is through the roof. It's causing global warming. And another kind of thing to consider, I know we're way off topic. Well, I guess we're not that far off topic, but uh, nuclear energy, which I think if we could do it right and we could somehow not put everyone's lives at risk, I mean, that would just be a fantastic source of energy, especially with the thorium nuclear reactors that use like salt or something that's abundant. And they're supposedly much less dangerous, but they've never fully developed them and fully gotten them to function. But I think we're either headed towards a world that is degrowth, like I said before. We're using less energy, especially with how this coronavirus is going to shake everything up, or possibly a new type of energy, possibly nuclear, that kind of puts us into a new paradigm.
I don't know. It's kind of. I mean, it's one of those things where, like you said, we keep getting pissed because there's so many people not taking it seriously. And I mean, if it just continues to grow and continues to make the impacts that it's having, it's gonna have a long-term global impact. We're never gonna go back to the way it was. We're never gonna go back to relying on other countries as much. So I mean, this is gonna, make a total 180 and make our entire government reevaluate alongside other countries' governments, reevaluate how they've been running things and how they're going to think of the long-term precautions when it comes down to the actual citizens.
Definitely. And I heard one of the people I listened to said, we're in for basically a collapse. And then he went about describing what the word collapse means. And all the word collapse means is a reduction in complexity. And we've been so focused on globalization, and it sounds like a good idea, kind of having the whole globe act as one, toward to help each other. And but yet, so that's added all of this complexity, and yet now we're facing a problem where all of that complexity and globalization is really causing a lot of problem in the countries. And one of the things that we were talking about before the show is the masks, and now the US is kind of cutting off all these other countries and outbidding them, because we can print the dollar, and the dollar is the world reserve currency, and everyone wants the dollar. So of course we can just create millions of dollars and throw them we can be the highest bidder to get all these masks. And Christian was telling me about this story. Do you want to tell us a little about that story you were reading?
Oh yeah, basically, the U.S. government definitely made a call for companies that are making masks and making any of the PPE equipment, and 3M was one of the main ones that they called out and said, you're supposed to be pretty much helping us as a country. Your duty as Americans, as an American company, would be to help us and manufacture masks and other PPE equipment for us rather than, have it shipped off to other countries. So basically putting us as a top priority over other countries. Well, in return, apparently Germany was supposed to get this load of masks from 3M, and they were on their way there, and apparently they were intercepted in Thailand and diverted to the US. And in doing that, it says, but 3M, which has come under intense criticism from the White House for producing face masks for overseas customers, said it had no evidence to suggest a mask order for the city of Berlin had been seized. But while doing this for Germany and Berlin, they're pissed. They're like, what the hell? And apparently, this isn't the first case that we've done this. We've been doing it so far, I guess, we've done it to Canada, we've done it to Germany, we've done it to Mexico. We're trying to get them to not send masks down to South America. Like, we're basically putting ourselves in a situation where we're not going to look very good compared to these other countries. We've raised ourselves up on this pedestal that we're supposed to be this main world power, and we're supposed to be setting an example. And in setting that example, you would think that we'd be pushing out as much as we can, and trying to make it even. I mean, I totally do understand the priorities of keeping the U.S. citizens at bay and keeping us all safe and whatnot. But I mean, in a sense, like back when China was first getting a lot of their outbreaks, like we should have been pushing our masks out there and like not trying to get from our stockpile, but we should have been trying to help them a little more than we did. I know that we did send them some masks, but then at this point, we're kind of just trying to hold everything to ourselves. And basically, for those of you who don't think that wearing a mask is important, I mean, I kind of would like to smack you in the face. I mean, regardless of if you're sick or not, wearing masks of any sort, covering your mouth, not going out if you're sick, social distancing, all the above, are things that are not specifically meant to protect you as a person, but to protect the people that you come in contact with. Because it's just a butterfly effect. One person sneezes on two people, those two people sneeze on four people. They go home to their kids and their families and their husbands and wives, and they start spreading it. Like, it's one of those things that people need to realize, that it's not just about being sanitary, and it's not just about making sure your hands are washed and making sure you wear gloves. Like, I mean, this thing, it's a viral infection that gets caught through, inhaling it, water droplets through your nose. And there's people trying to say that water droplets are too heavy for the virus to spread. And I personally take offense to that, just because I'm like, why are people spreading this false information saying that it's not going to spread through sneezing and coughing and any sort of viral fluids, when in fact it is a viral infection that once you get into your lungs, it causes people's bodies to shut down in a sense to where they're deprived of oxygen, and like you've said before, they literally choke on their own like fluids, their own phlegm. I mean, it's not a pleasant way to go out at all, and just the irresponsibility that we see, not only in I mean, I see it in our state in Utah more than anything, because I mean, you can only compare it to other countries from what you see on TV and whatever. But I mean, I've seen China, Japan, Thailand, India. I've actually gone on my own and checked on Facebook Maps and clicked and read or watched people's stories from different countries. And you watch people walking around, their entire population is wearing a mask. Like, it's not just one or two people, it's not just the sick people. And at this point, like, that's something that needs to change. And it's really sad to think that when you look at the World Health Organization website to how to protect yourself against coronavirus, it just says if you're healthy, you only need to wear a mask if you're taking care of a person suspected to have COVID. Wear a mask if you're coughing or sneezing. And then it says masks are only effective when used in combination with frequent hand cleaning and alcohol-based soap. So if you wear a mask, then you must know how to dispose of it properly. Not anywhere does that say that everybody should be wearing a mask regardless of if they're sick. It's straight up telling them, basically, if you're coughing or sneezing, wear a mask, and if you're taking care of somebody that is sick, wear a mask. But, I mean, from even like Trump's speech, I think it was yesterday, how they've all of a sudden turned the page now, and they're saying, okay, wait, everybody should be wearing masks. We should be containing this thing. And I think at this point, it's little like it's like the United States is like the boy that cried wolf. Like, we can't talk about something not being that big of a deal and not spreading the way that it's spreading, and then all of a sudden it starts spreading, and we're like, wait. Okay, everybody has to take this seriously now. When at this point, there's already been, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that have just been walking around without masks, going about their daily life. There's still plenty of companies that are open. There's still plenty of restaurants that have their lobbies open. Like, I mean, still places accepting cash. Like, and I mean, this virus is just spreading. I mean, the longer people go without quarantining themselves and, trying to stay home as much as possible, and when they do have to go out, making those valid points of wearing gloves, changing your changing your shoes, leaving your shoes at the door, like, washing your hands, all of it comes down to it. But the biggest thing is the mask, because if no fluids are going to leave your body, or no fluids are going to leave anybody else's body, then there's no chance of it spreading to you, as long as you dispose of your mask correctly.
Definitely. So that actually cut out on me quite a bit. So hopefully that worked on the recording. I did hear the last little bit though. Yeah, and that's something, I mean, we've been saying on the show since we started that masks are important. Chris Martinson has been talking up masks for over a month now, and the people in the White House and stuff, they know, they have the same data, if not better data than what we're getting and what Chris Martinson's getting, and they simply just didn't want to admit that there's a huge mask shortage. So they spread all this misinformation of saying how masks are worse for you and how they don't possibly do anything unless you're sick, and that you need to save them for the medical professionals, which is, we do need, they're the ones who need to have it most, for sure. There's no questioning that. But if they basically just told everyone, start making a mask, then we could get everybody masked up in a 24 to 48 hour period. If they just started blasting that in the White House, saying this is the most important thing, everybody make a mask, start wearing it. If you're not wearing it, you're a fucking idiot. And I would love to hear Trump say that on live TV, because that would maybe get people to hear it. If he just was swearing at people, telling them to wear a mask, and get everyone to make one. And we, this, I'm looking at a graph here I just pulled up while you were talking. It basically has the countries split into two different categories: the ones who have not been wearing masks as a whole country, and the countries that have been wearing masks. And so the ones who have been, a lot of these are ones we've heard of: South Korea, Japan, Singapore, Hong Kong. They have just basically made it socially unacceptable to not wear a mask. And if you look at pictures, you have a hard time finding anyone that doesn't have something over their face. And the spread of their disease has totally just leveled off and slowed down. And another thing I heard is that their flu and other sicknesses have pretty much fallen off the radar too, which is a really important thing, because if hospitals are already overwhelmed, then any additional easing that we can put on that is just going to help way more. So definitely masks are going to be the best thing that you can do, along with every other thing CJ said. But I think since we're having a little bit of connection issues and we've been going for quite a while, I think let's go ahead and wrap this up. What do you think, CJ?
Yeah, that's cool, man. I mean, I let out most of my rant, and I'm pretty sure we're all recorded on my side, so.
Yeah, yeah, I got out most of I got out all my rant, and damn, it felt good. And you know what? If any of you guys listen to this, if you think we got a little too crazy, said a little too much swear words, no hard feelings. We're just having fun on this show. Next show, we'll be back to respectful Jerry and respectful CJ.
Yeah, we won't be calling anybody out too much. I mean, depending on the direction we go. If if we don't see anything change here, you might see us real pissed off, and you don't like Jerry when he gets angry, so you wouldn't like me when I get angry either.
Yeah, that's true. With the way things going, it might be a rant cast from here on out. Who knows?
Might be the okay, I'm pissed off, or the you know what really grinds my gears.
Yeah, I'm definitely still having a little bit of connection issues, but we'll go ahead and sign out now. I want to thank all of our listeners for tuning in, and we hope to see you next week.
Right on, thanks guys.